Welcome to Pep Talks with Jeanne. I'm your host, Jeanne Pepper. I started doing Pep Talks as a way to inspire you to do intentional acts of kindness and to further the goals of Blaze It Forward. Since Pep Talks began, it has evolved, and now I use it to interview people actively making a difference in this world through their volunteerism, community service, or careers. My guests are all here because they have dedicated their lives to making this world a better place. Join us as we delve into the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of these truly inspiring and hardworking people. This season, we will be focusing on the quiet superheroes, the thoughtful, kind, and forward-thinking community-minded individuals that teach us about resiliency, abundance, and how we can turn trauma, tragedy, and life challenges into meaningful, intentional action to repair our world. Welcome to another episode of Pep Talks with Jeanne. Today we are joined by a woman whose story needs to be told. With everything she has been through, resiliency is one of her great strengths. Addie Zinone, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jeanne. I'm really grateful to be here and so nice to meet you, my friend.
I'm really thrilled that I finally got to meet you too and get you in here. Let me tell the audience a little bit about you just to get us started here. In 1999, Addie was a 24-year-old production assistant at NBC's Today Show. Like so many young women entering the workforce, she was talented, ambitious, and vulnerable. When she was targeted by one of the most powerful men in media, she was thrust into a dynamic of silent coercion, a predatory environment where power just isn't used, it is weaponized. And she's not the only one, because around that same time, I was experiencing the same thing as a young lawyer. Addie didn't just lose her sense of safety, she lost her career. She was pushed out of the industry she loved because she was a witness to a truth that the world just wasn't ready to hear yet. But what do you do when your dream is stolen? If you're Addie, you find a new way to serve. And Addie traded the studio for the sandbox, joining the U.S. military as a broadcast journalist and serving 2 combat tours in Iraq. She faced the literal fires of war, carrying the weight of both workplace trauma and combat PTSD. A journey that eventually led her through the dark valley of alcoholism and into the light of a hard-won, beautiful recovery and sobriety. Today, she is a mother, a truth teller, and a survivor. She is here to give a voice to the marginalized and the unheard, reminding us all that while the cost of courage is high, the cost of silence is even higher. Addie, thank you for being here to tell your story today.
Yeah, thank you, Jeanne. I'm really grateful to have a platform and to be in a place where I can talk about these things, these hard truths that you talk about. We live in silence, or we suffer in silence, rather, for a really long time until we're able to harness our voice and then use it and realize that it's a voice that needs to be shared with others who are going through the same thing, who may feel shame, guilt. They're not sure what to do with these intangible injuries that so many of us have. And that's the suffering in silence that I really was held hostage by for so many years, until I decided to find my voice and take off my mask and not worry so much about what people would think about the way I coped, but maybe they can be inspired by the way I'm trying to bounce back and live my life in a more authentic way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am grateful that women like you have come forward. I wish that I had come forward when it happened to me. Yeah. And I know exactly why you didn't. Because as a young attorney, I was afraid to say something because I thought it would affect my ability to have a promotion.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean,
Absolutely.
When Matt approached me, we'll call it that, I certainly was in a position, number one, I was shocked. And number two, I was in way over my head. Like you said, I was a young 24-year-old intern turned production assistant. And this man who I had watched in a professional environment for almost 2 years and saw no hint or indication that he would ever cross a line, especially with me. I was born in West Virginia, the backwoods of West Virginia. And I went to college on a gymnastics scholarship. So I went from the backwoods of West Virginia into North Philadelphia. And I loved Philadelphia. I loved the energy of the city. I loved the diversity. I loved the people. But I was still living a very sheltered life. I didn't have a lot of experience with life and people. And then when I got to the Today Show, that is a dream come true. I wrote Katie Couric a letter after I finished gymnastics. And I was like, I love what you do, but I know all of your work is done behind the camera when you leave my TV every morning at 8:55. Can I come up and spend a day with you? And I just wrote this letter to her. I didn't know her. I didn't know anybody. And I emailed it to her. I faxed it to her. She eventually got it. And then her assistant called me and said, Katie was really impressed with your letter. Would you like to come up and spend a day with her? And I was like, would I?
Amazing.
Yes. And so that's how I got to the Today Show. I went up and met Katie. And in the fall of 1998, it was when President Clinton's grand jury testimony was being aired. And so it was a big news day. And I got to see how they did news behind the camera in the control room. I got to see how they did these updates. And I was like, I've got to be here. It was like my next passion after gymnastics and sports. And I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. And then when Katie and I had a separate conversation, she invited me over to her office and she said, well, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. What do? I literally don't know. And she said, well, you need to get an internship. You need to get some experience. And I was like, okay, let's make that happen. Yeah. And then she helped me. She was like, would you be willing to come up here to do an internship at the Today Show? And I was like, would I? Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got to the Today Show. And I was welcomed by this woman who I watched on TV for years. And I didn't just like that she was famous. Her husband had just died. You know, the Today Show was at its peak in terms of its popularity, and the strength of it was just amazing. It's what brought me into it. But I wanted to know how she dealt with the heads of states and then also people like Bill Cosby and how she managed that. And she could do these conversations and these interviews with people who could relate to her, and she felt accessible, and she was. And I love that about her way of journalism, you know, and I thought that's what I want to do. And so she brought me into that environment, and I thrived because I worked my butt off for it. And then in swoops Matt Lauer, and his intentions were very different than Katie's, even different than Matt and Ann's. And I was so naive to that. I think that everybody is going to have my best interest at heart, because that was my experience at the Today Show, from the people who did the graphics, who did the control room, who were the, production assistants, the supervising producers. They allowed me to see what it is they do. And then I got that experience. But with Matt, it was completely different. And so he preyed upon me. And I certainly didn't have the fortitude, and I didn't have the life experience or the strength to understand what was happening until it was too late.
Yeah. I noticed that well, I didn't say Matt's full name when we were,
Right.
because I know I'm sensitive to, because I don't like talking about the person that killed my son,
right.
because I don't feel that their name deserves to be mentioned.
Right.
But unfortunately, in this case, it's very relevant to the story, because Matt Lauer at the time was in a position of power.
Yes.
He was, probably one of the most, highly statused, journalists at the time. Probably one of the most well paid
well paid, and
right?
definitely at NBC and on the Today Show. Second to Katie, it was the most powerful journalist in television news, right? And I was working alongside him every single day. And so the man that you see on camera, it was the man who was behind the scenes, right? So we thought, until he gets behind closed doors, and then it's a completely different ball game. And I didn't understand the game I was playing, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that really just goes to show that what we see on television is what they want us to see.
Absolutely.
So
he's very good at it.
Yeah.
Very good at it.
And it's not just Matt, like the producers want you to see a certain thing, a certain way. And so, it all kind of just flows together, so that these things get kind of brushed under the rug and nobody ever knows what's really going on.
Right. We're all playing our parts, right?
Correct.
And we're all performing in some degree, because, at the Today Show, it was for this #1 show, right? And the substance and content was amazing, but everybody sort of played their part. And it was like, those are the things that go left unsaid. So anybody who did see, even Katie, and she's admitted this, that in hindsight, she can see how these things were happening, and that she should have seen more, but she didn't. Right.
Yeah.
And those aren't intentional blind spots, but they are the blind spots that people conveniently have to work in those environments and keep feeding the beast.
Well, yeah. And, he was smart too. He never let on, to any of these powerful women that were in that office that this was happening.
Well, yeah. And he wasn't hitting on the, senior producers and the, who knew better, or had a little bit of, agency. And I had no agency. I had no defense. And I certainly did not think that this man would do that. And right in there is the danger, right?
Yeah.
Getting that perfect situation. And then what do you do in that moment?
Yeah.
And that I acquiesced is one of the biggest regrets of my life, but also one of the biggest lessons that I've had to learn, and how I fortify my daughter and other young women as they're growing up, and to take this experience and try to fortify and educate, and then change workplace culture. It's not just one person who contributes to that. It's those who turn their eyes, and those who just protect the Matt was, He's payday, right? And so you have to protect your most important asset, and Matt was one of those, and I wasn't.
Yeah, and I think too, things have probably changed in the last 25 years, especially with the Me Too movement. And,
Right.
And it still is. I mean, look what happened with that Johnny Depp trial with
Amber Heard.
Amber Heard. I watched that, and it was abhorrent to me how they treated her.
Oh yeah, she was just a horror. They make jokes of her today.
I know.
You know,
And
today.
all that she was doing was standing up for herself.
Right.
I thought, the victim blaming, like just because the person that did this to her is, popularly recognized as a Disney character,
Right.
Nobody wants to believe that a Disney character could ever do something
Right.
so horrible. How could she accuse, this wonderful character of such a thing?
Right. And,
You know?
and he's an actor. And so when he tells his story, he's engaging, he's charismatic.
Sure.
And of course, when you're in that environment, you're not going to say or do all the right things, especially under that microscope. And then just being able to come up and say, hey, this happened to me. And then to have the legal process. And, it's like they devalued her and dehumanized her so much that, she can't find her voice in that mix.
And what's really disturbing about that for me, and it should be for all women, is that when these things happen, and we all, women included, watch these things and participate in victim shaming and blaming, it continues to perpetuate this attitude and almost it's okay environment in any environment.
Yeah.
And this was a consensual relationship too that she was in.
Right, of
Right.
course.
So, just because you agree to be in a relationship with someone doesn't mean that they can take advantage of you.
Well, you can still
Right?
abuse your power.
Right.
And Johnny
Take advantage
Depp's
of
power,
you, abuse
and
you,
his money and his
coerce
fame.
you
Absolutely.
to do things you don't want to do. There's so many, parts of this, and these relationships are very complicated.
And nuanced.
Yes. There's a lot of nuance here.
There really is. And I mean, and even people who would write to me in the comments or when my story became public, they're like, well, I think he's a jerk. He's a jerk. I mean, that goes left unsaid, but you're the whore and you're the one who did it. And it's so,
yeah, it's always
because they'll
blame
preface
the
it by
victim.
saying, we don't like him either, and it's so many women. And
I just don't understand it.
yeah, and I can understand it because, I mean, maybe there was a time, let's say in the 90s, around the same time, Monica Lewinsky and President Clinton were in the news, right? And the way we treated this woman was insane.
It was terrible also.
Just terrible, right? And she's never condoned that what she did was right. But you can see the power imbalance there and what we did to her. And even I, probably at that time, having no education, no life experience, no understanding of what the complexities of that dynamic, right? The situation she was in, the power of the government and coming on her. And just that she still speaks today is amazing. But even I probably contributed to those jokes about Monica Lewinsky before I knew better, right? And the thing is, when we know better, we do better. And having that own experience myself, and then 17 years later, it becoming public fodder, it has, my goodness, has it like humbled me, right? It right-sized me. And that's basically what I needed. Number one, to validate that what I experienced was an abuse of power, that I was given no choice once he crossed that line. And then I can also look at my behavior and be accountable for the things I wish I did better or that I didn't do better. And then I can correct that and or warn other people about it so that they make better choices than I did.
Yeah.
Because there was a choice to make.
You didn't really make a bad choice. There was no good choice.
There's no good choice.
There was nothing you could do. I mean, you would have lost your job, most likely, if you had pushed him away.
Right. I mean, it was going to be an uncomfortable environment for me no matter what.
Yeah.
So there was no good option, right?
There wasn't.
And that's the thing is, for us, it's how do we fortify people before that even happens? Or how do we make it so impossible for those things to go on behind the scenes while everybody is around that they're not put in that position anyway?
Yeah.
And it's not going to be a perfect process. And these are ugly, hard conversations.
Yeah.
I certainly did not want to be on TV talking about this experience I had in the year 2000 and the shame and humiliation that I carried for years. But his behavior caught up with him, right? And I know that at least
It took way too long.
way too long, but for 17 years, I know,
Wow.
like from 2000, and it happened way before that because it was way too easy for him. But just the fact that it went on that long, if I could have spoken
Incredible.
up, if I would have spoken up, if we could, not that I'm going to save people, I'm not coming in here as the hero, I'm not wearing a cape here, but I just know that there were a lot of me's that happened between 2000 and 2017, and those me's contact me, and they see what's happened to me, and they don't want to use their names because they're still afraid of the power that he has, not anymore at NBC, but just as a name. And what happens when you are when you have to, like I did, have to tell my story.
Do you think that the Me Too movement has improved things for women in general, or at all, or in
I think the momentum of it, was good initially, right?
Right.
And then I think that it can be weaponized in a way where it just, you become too extreme. And those who have any reluctance or resistance to the Me Too movement, then they use those as extremes, like, oh, you can't say or do anything, and they make it right. And I mean, that's just a ridiculous way to take it. And so, like all movements, like all campaigns, there's a nuance and there's context, and I think we all have to meet in the middle somewhere, right? And not be too extreme on either side. And that's what I like to do, and invite conversations in. And for me specifically, it was, it wasn't rape, it wasn't an attack or an assault on me, but it's a really important piece of the conversation that needs to be talked about, this power imbalance, right? When you are essentially coerced, or you're put in a position where you don't have a good option. And those are really important, because those are the things happening day to day in workplaces where you can't go through the judicial system to take care of it. You don't want to go to HR, because usually HR is there to protect, it's like doing an internal investigation and how do we police ourselves, right? And so my experience was like, it was never even a possibility that I would go to HR and say, this happened, right? This is what happened. Because number one, I felt like I was an active participant in something. And it took me a long time to realize that in that dynamic, I didn't have much of a choice. But I still have to be accountable for the choice I did make. And then I have to wonder why I made it. And so for whatever...
If you were a man, you wouldn't have to.
No, I wouldn't have to.
Right?
But I am a woman and I have to.
No,
right?
you don't. I say no, you don't. If you were a man in that situation, you'd be bragging to everybody that you just had sex with the head female anchor, right?
And that's the truth, because even my brother, bless his heart, my brother is a couple years older than me. He just could not understand how I thought I was a victim. And he knows me, because he's like, if it were me and it was some hot lady, I would have enjoyed it. Well, it's a completely different experience. You weren't, you didn't experience this. You didn't go through it, and I did. And a powerful man up against a intern who idolized the person, right? And is caught in that position. It's a completely different dynamic. And so while you may think that's what you would have done, and maybe you would have responded in that way, like it was a notch on your belt, it wasn't a notch on my belt. It was traumatizing.
And that's really the problem here, is that, men don't understand it. Like, why is she cowering? Why is she hiding this? She should be proud of this accomplishment.
You just wanted to do this.
And women look at it. I mean, some women look at this situation who have not experienced this, and they look at it as, she's going to steal my husband. Right. She's going to steal my boyfriend.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
She's just power hungry. She's going to sleep her way to the top.
Right.
And she'll do whatever she has to do to get there.
And that is what a lot of people who haven't heard my story and heard me tell it think, that I was just trying to sleep my way to the top.
And you know what? Who cares? What if that was the reason? Like, men don't do things like that?
Right.
Like a man wouldn't, and we would think that was wrong if a man did that.
And if that's your case and you do that, then I mean, you can own your choices, and there's fallout from that, right? But then I have to own what my choice was and try to reconcile it, not to forgive myself necessarily, but to understand how a seemingly good person got.
But what did you do wrong? Can you please tell me what you did wrong?
Well, let's say, okay, so I went out to lunch with essentially
that's
a married
so wrong.
man, right?
That's wrong, because, you only worked with him.
But, and again,
right?
And that's the issue, where it sounded like it made sense, because I had a relationship with Ann and Katie and everybody.
He was supposedly there to help you and support you in your work.
I know. And I can just look at that and say, okay, should I have put on some, hit the brakes a little bit and just
really, what would that have looked like, Addie?
It would have been terrible for me, absolutely.
If you'd put the brakes on? Mm-hmm. Okay, so then why would anyone expect you to do that?
Right. In hindsight, I guess I wouldn't expect, I wouldn't expect myself. So did you
do something wrong? Why do you think you did something wrong? Just because
because he was a married man, and
he was a married man. But how is that your problem?
No, it's not my problem. But I certainly have an understanding about what the wife's experience is.
I agree with you.
And even when this came out, I did not want to hurt her.
You
don't
want to hurt anybody, and there are children often involved in these situations as well. And there's a thing about being a home wrecker, or
right.
I mean. is that a valid reason to shame a woman? I don't know.
Well, if that were my motivation, genuinely, if
Yeah.
I had an interest in Matt in that way, and that was literally my motivation, I may feel a little like that too. Like I could stand in my power. I'm not the one who's married. I can make my choices.
Yeah.
But that wasn't my experience. You know, it was very
You actually had a
painful.
conscience about
And
it.
Well, and it was painful to me. Painful.
Yeah, because
it
you
completely-
knew that he was betraying someone
And I also knew that he was using me, and I was under no illusion
because he
that-
wasn't leaving his new bride to run off with you. I mean,
is
you
even
knew that.
Yes, I knew I was being used, and I knew I couldn't stop it, and it was overwhelming, and so it just devastated me and who I am and how I presented in the world. And I was supposed to go down the local news and be on TV and really step into this job that for the 2 years prior, everybody at that show, even including Matt, when it wasn't, having lunch, made me feel like I could do it. And I worked my butt off to do that. And I went down and I crumbled under the weight of the shame and guilt of this experience. And I had to see him on TV, and I had the National Enquirer hunting me and chasing me around. And I'm from the backwoods of West Virginia, from born again Christians, and any sin that you have, it's like you're going to be cast to hell for eternity. And so if you commit adultery or this is just some of the conditioning that I had in my thinking.
Don't born again Christians also believe that as long as you have accepted the Lord Jesus as your Savior, you are
Well, those are pretty words.
judgment free?
Right. Unfortunately, they aren't. But the biggest judgment was the one I had on myself. And so
clearly.
it was just a matter of like, what have I done? Right. And so I was shattered in terms of like how I thought that I could do this job. And then it just annihilated my confidence, my worth, what I was really doing there.
Oh, I completely understand that because, I mean, I don't know if not everybody's going to be watching you and know exactly how gorgeous you are, but to have somebody who is only interested in you for what you represent physically because of your attractiveness,
Devastating.
and they're not actually interested in the work that you do or your ability. It sends a message to you as a woman that you are only as good as your vagina.
Right. Well,
That's all you are. That
Yeah.
you don't have the ability to actually be a good correspondent.
Yeah.
And to actually do this job. But, in reality, the reality of it is that this is what men do to keep women in their place.
Right. And you hit on something really important there, right? Because it's like it did become about who and what I am as opposed to who and what I can do. And I just knew that this is what I wanted to do with my life.
Right.
And I went down to West Virginia, and he was like the last experience I had at the Today Show. And I was just left shattered. And then
Of course.
I've got the National Enquirer hounding me, and I'm at risk of it becoming public, and I have no power in that situation. And Matt had all the power, and I knew that I was up against a mammoth, just this big machine that did
Absolutely.
protect him for a really long time. And it was the collective voices in 2017
That's right.
that made it possible.
Because when women work together and support each other, that's
Right.
when we can see real change.
The reason that I actually decided to just pull the plug and say, yes, I'm going to tell this story is because I was reading stories about Matt and about the staff who was saying, oh, they didn't know. And I heard they were anonymous people commenting, but their quotes were in the People magazines and stuff. And they're like, yes, we knew that Matt cheated on his wife, but to say that Matt would look at some of the vulnerable women at the show and he would prey upon them and do that. No, I just don't believe that's true. And I knew it was true in 2000. And I knew it was true because that's what he was doing, preying on the vulnerable, on the staff there. There are a lot of me's walking through those halls over those years.
Absolutely.
And it angered me so much because I knew some of those people, right? And they were now saying that he couldn't possibly do that. And I knew he did that. And I know that they remember me from working there. And I knew that if I came out and said, this is what happened, and yes, this is what he does, then they would have to reconcile that and they would have to pay attention. And so I decided that I was going to give not just my story anonymously, I'm going to give my voice, I'm going to give my face. And you people remember me, right? And I'm just going to own up to what I did and bring this out because I have to validate these other women who are so afraid to speak up. And I don't know because I had been at war or I just had some perspective. I don't know, but I was just sick and tired of being in silence and sick and tired of pretending that he did not have a part to play in this and that power imbalance was the main reason, right, that this happened because I was just consumed by the weight of his popularity, by his charisma, by his pull. Production assistants and everybody at that show are taught to feed the talent, right? Do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And I'm not using that as an excuse, but it plays into that dynamic.
Absolutely
and that thought
does.
process.
And, and it's in every workplace
And
as
you
well.
don't say no.
Right. You don't say no. And this is, obviously in a situation like this where we're talking about, people that make millions of dollars a year.
Goodness.
And then, when I look at like my own little situation and other women who work in corporate America, when you're working for the man, literally.
Absolutely.
Because why are you working for the man? Because women didn't even have the right to vote until the 1920s in the United States. That's why.
Right. And then when we do, we're these out of control, like emotional women who just look how, when they're under stress.
It takes time for women to, we need generations of women, people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and others,
goodness,
right, who
yes.
have been successful and who paved the way for us. But,
Right.
The problem is that there are always going to be people, including women, who they like seeing women in these
subservient, submissive.
They
the patriarchy is
women
strong and
to
real.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. We're programmed from birth
Right.
to believe all of these things, to believe that only men can be in these positions, that women have to serve them and hold them up in their positions.
Yes.
I feel that was part of my programming. I
Yeah.
witnessed that in my home.
You did?
I saw my mother. My mother was the slave to the king in the house, right?
Know your place, little
Yeah,
lady.
she knew her place in that house. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was raised on that. So it was, it seemed to make complete sense to me when I got into, the workplace and these things started happening to me as well. I can tell you in high school, I had high school coaches that were making advances at me when I was a teenager all the time. I would come home and I would tell my Mom, the coach today, he's calling me legs. Yeah. And that's the name that he gave me. And, he's always making comments about my body and, he's always giving me creepy eyes
Right.
and why, like, it's awful. And my mom was like, oh, just be quiet.
Right.
Just leave
He's
it
giving you some
alone.
attention,
Just,
right?
Right.
Or the boys hit you because they like you.
Right. Oh,
right.
yeah,
They're
that's
picking
a
on
nice
you because
one.
they like you.
Don't worry about it. Just do your work and don't let these people bother you. Well, I'll never forget when I got the phone call when I was in college from my mom that one of these people was going to prison for raping a student.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's just a matter of time. It's all a gateway. And if that's not policed,
Right.
they feel entitled, right? And that entitlement leads to very violent situations
Yes.
behind closed doors. And so
absolutely. But even knowing that like we should have spoken out when I was in high school
Right.
because he ended up going on to rape someone. Hey, did that change the way I behaved in these situations when I was older? Did I stand up and say, hey, this guy's sexually harassing me at work so that I could make sure that it didn't happen to anybody else? No.
Right.
Why? Because I didn't want to lose my job.
Absolutely. Or you don't want to cause problems, or you don't want to stand out for that reason.
Right.
Or you don't want to make the dynamic weird. You don't want to make them uncomfortable.
I'm just there to get a
Right.
paycheck. You know what? If you want to sexually harass me and pay me for it, fine. Right. I'm just going to say no. And, if you fire me, then I guess I'll have to sue you.
Right.
But it's like, it shouldn't have to be that way. It just shouldn't be happening.
Right. And that's part of the conversation that I wanted to, moving forward. How do you place, it's systemic, right? And it's all institutionalized. And so it's a matter of changing institutions and cultures and workplace. No matter what, you cannot get away with this. You cannot have an HR who has to police themselves because the bottom line, they're all still working for that bottom line.
Yes.
And part of having a voice in this way is how would we create that change in workplace cultures where women, especially women reporters we are objectified all the time. And look at her makeup, look at how she talks, look at her voice, right? And the men just get away with so much more. And I love men.
And they get paid more.
Yeah, I don't want to give the impression
more than their women colleagues.
Right. I don't want to give the impression that I hate men. I do not at all. But it's like we have a completely different experience here. And trying to navigate a situation like I did, being by myself still, I'm a mom of 2 at that point. I'm married, I'm a middle-class housewife of Orange County. I'm just a normal chick, and now all of a sudden I've got this story that is being told, and I don't have a PR machine. I don't have money behind me. All I have is my truth and my voice. And I was finally able and willing to use it and not acquiesce and stay silent for his comfort.
So
or
brave.
even for my own comfort. And it is very uncomfortable.
Yes. And I have seen some of those reports that were done about you. There's a very good one by Megyn Kelly. And I don't know if you would be okay with it, but we could have a link to one of those interviews that you
Absolutely,
approve
the
of, maybe
Megan
that
Kelly- yes,
one, and that'll
sure.
be on my website. So
Okay.
anybody that wants to look at the show notes, you can check out the website that will
Yeah.
have Addie Zinone on it with those links.
Yep.
And you can check out, what she had to say. And this was, 8 years ago, but it hasn't changed. It's
It
still
is
the same story.
It is still relevant, and his story comes
relevant.
up, often. And Katie Couric did her memoir in 2021 called "Going There," and a big part of that was, Katie didn't know anything about this experience until. And she outlines this in her book. Chapter 93 of her book is titled Addie. And she tells the story about how she and Matt were supposed to talk that day. And so she got up, but somebody sent her a link to my story in Variety. And she knows me because she helped get me to the Today Show, right? And so she has that relationship with me. And she read my story. And then she told him, I cannot meet or talk today, right? And then we reconnected, and I was able to talk about my story. And, and that helped her understand. And it helped humanize it for her because she knew me personally, and she knew what I was like at the show and how hard I worked, and that he took advantage of that, you know. And so it's just an important voice that once you're willing to use it, and I became willing to use mine, no longer cowering, and I will not allow this man to have that much more power over me, but it's not easy. It is not easy. It's very brutal. So all that work I did between the year 2000 to 2017, it is now smothered by the story of Matt Lauer, right? And so you have to dig deep to look at my accomplishments. But using my voice here, we can smother this as well.
Well, I see you as a hero.
Oh, well,
You're so brave. You're a brave person who came out against something that was wrong.
you know
And
what?
you
I'm
did
gonna
that to
take
support other women because
did.
you knew that other women were coming out now who had finally had enough. Some other brave women put their own careers on the line, and you wanted to support them.
No,
that
I
was
really
brave.
did.
You didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
You could have just continued living your middle class life with your husband and your two children.
Right.
But you put your neck out there and opened yourself up to this, ridiculous criticism, scrutiny.
Right.
And what for, Addie? Did you have something, to gain from any of this?
That's when people do initially see my story, they think that I'm trying to get something out of it, but I've never benefited ever. And in fact, there were so many times because the National Enquirer would have paid me some decent money to tell my story. And, when you're just a small town West Virginia girl making $13,000 a year doing live television, it is so tempting, especially because it's almost like I want him to get his revenge too, because he's just going about his life. I'm just another notch, right?
Yeah.
It's of no consequence to him. But eventually it did. And there were these parts of me that wanted that revenge. That anger was so like, I want him to just ruin his life, but it would ruin mine too in the process. And I always rejected those voices inside of me that wasn't authentic or who I really am. And so I have tried to navigate this very authentically. And that means sometimes I'm going to be called names or the message is going to be put out there the wrong way. And I don't combat it because I can't combat every single negative thing said about me.
And also, who are the people that are saying these things? I mean,
Right.
no reputable journalist is
Right.
going to say anything negative about you.
You wouldn't think so, and I hope no. And again,
No,
Jeanne,
I don't think.
I just believe in. I have my truth, and when I can talk about it and provide the context and nuance, all I'm asking you is that you keep an open mind. You don't have to agree with me. I can certainly understand people's reluctance to think that I'm a victim in that dynamic. But the fact is, there's a power imbalance there that made that thing happen, right? And I can own my part in it, and then I can be part of the process in trying to make sure that other women who wouldn't want to participate in that, some people probably want to participate in that stuff, enthusiastically. And yes, I'm an affair with Matt Lauer, and that's fine. You can have that experience, but it wasn't mine. And I'm here to just talk about mine and how other people in my situation, how can we fortify you so that you don't step into that landmine, because that's what it is.
Well, a big piece of this puzzle is that we need to stop shaming women for their sexuality.
Oh, and I mean, goodness,
I mean,
yes.
bottom line,
right.
what a woman does with her body is her business.
And I agree.
Why are
Dude.
we shaming anybody?
Right. No, I agree with you, But the thing I wanted to be known for, right? Like the idea that I would have a title in Katie Couric's book, it would be like a dream come true in 1998.
But not about this.
But not about this, right?
Right.
And so there's this part where it's like, because I'm reluctant to even send people that way.
You were 24 years old.
Yeah.
You
No,
were a
yeah.
child. Hello.
I know.
Did you know that in the state of California, they're trying to pass a bill that would allow convicted murderers who are life without possibility of parole, they want to let them out if they killed before they were the age of 23. 6.
Oh, because they're saying because their frontal lobe
Oh, yeah,
wasn't
because
fully
they
developed.
weren't able. So, Addie, maybe that's what the problem is here. Your frontal lobes weren't fully developed. So, therefore, we can't hold you accountable for
That's
what
not
happened.
the only thing it wasn't.
You know, just jump on there in that bandwagon of people that think that being young gives you an excuse for doing whatever you want to do. But my point is that you didn't do anything wrong in the first place.
Thank you.
We don't need to defend your behavior. We need to condemn the behavior of an older, seasoned person taking advantage of a young person in a very small position in their company.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he is a predator.
Clearly a predator, clearly did something wrong. And it took how many years? 17 years from the time it happened to you, probably 30 years from the time he first started doing this crap to people.
Anytime he had a position of power. And even then, it was just he felt entitled to it. He literally just felt entitled to it and did not care at all about my experience. And that's the thing that's so painful.
Yeah. Well, that's a misogynist for you.
You're right. Exactly.
And it even goes beyond that. This is just somebody that doesn't care about anybody.
Right.
This is a narcissist.
Yeah, and I even challenged him when he came out and put out this statement about how for 2 years I've sat and listened to these women take no accountability. They didn't have to tell their husbands or whatever. And I put out a pretty powerful statement in response to that. And I was like, Matt knows the truth about this. And I directly approached him and called his name. And I was like, he knows exactly what happened. And these are the facts. And I laid that out. And that felt really empowering to me because I was able to finally stand up to this man and say, nope, not today. You're not going to silence me and I'm not going to cower, and you can wield these words, and so you want to have a conversation, let's talk about the facts. Not that he would, but basically I just felt empowered that I could meet him where he was finally. And it took a long time to get there.
Did he ever deny the affair?
He never denied the affair. No, not. He didn't even address me specifically. He was like, there's enough truth in these stories that I feel ashamed. But then when he said, I've listened for 2 years, these women who claim to be a part of something that they participated in, not want to be honest with their husbands and their kids about the truth of it. And basically saying that I had lied to people about, my participation in that. And I just came back with a statement saying I absolutely did not. I was honest to my then now husband, and I told the truth about what happened in that, that day.
You weren't married.
Yeah, it was just a really empowering moment though for me, and I wasn't going to cower to him anymore. I'm done doing that. I am done doing that.
Yeah. You should be.
Thank you.
There's nothing for you to be embarrassed about, and it hurts me to see that
because
I hate it when the patriarchy is this powerful that it can bring down a woman on the verge of greatness, a gorgeous, smart woman who's worked her tush off to get where she is, and then to have a man take it away from her. Yeah. So to advance himself for his own pleasure, for his own, to feed his own ego.
That's all it was.
And that's really what it comes down to. And I don't like that. I hate unfairness. Yeah. And that is a really unfair thing that happened.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. I see that, and I think everybody does, but people are afraid to just say things that are real and honest.
Right. Because it's ugly. I mean, my goodness, do you think I want to have these conversations with my mom? My in-laws heard about the story on Fox News when their name came up on the screen, and they're like, what? They're in New Jersey thinking, what the hell's going on, right? And
you know what? It was one little piece of 1 month of a life of thousands of months in it.
Right. But with a lot of consequences.
With a lot of consequences. But what about all the years that followed and all the incredible things you did after that? I mean, you went on to become a journalist in the U.S. military. I mean, that's kind of a big deal, Addie.
Kind of a big deal. I never would imagine I'd be a combat veteran. I never would have.
And not just one tour, two tours in Iraq.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite impressive.
Thank you. My military service is something I'm incredibly proud of.
You're a badass. I mean, the fact that this weasel in a suit could get away with this for so long and not have anybody call him out on it. No one brave enough to stand up to this weasel.
I know, until Brooke came along and she did. And, and then, the House of Lauer falls. But, there are still, we're all trying to dig our way out of that. But, and again, it was a direct response. The trauma from that experience is a direct, I went to join the Army because I was just in such a mess. I was 25 years old at that point, and I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I thought I was ready to be on air. And I was, just deteriorating quickly under the weight of what the personal shame.
I think it shook your confidence.
Oh, It completely annihilated
It does. It really does.
Annihilated.
I mean,
And
you always question when these things happen. You know, am I only here because I'm pretty?
well, and that's the thing, like, what kind of person am I, right? And it was like, what am I going to do with myself? It just annihilated me. And that is hard for people to understand if they think, oh, it was just a month, it was barely anything. No, it was everything.
Yeah.
It really was everything, at least to me and how I dealt.
Well,
and I didn't talk about any of this stuff,
Of
right?
course.
Like,
I mean, at 25, your first job is everything.
first job. Yeah, and
It's
it was
your whole
like
life.
the biggest news. I mean, I just felt so lucky, and then I just felt so demolished. But regardless, I had to pick myself up, and the way that I did that was run away to the military. I went to go see a recruiter prior to 9/11 because these soldiers came into this place where I was waitressing in Philadelphia, where I went to college, and I saw them in their uniform, and I'm like, I'd really love to go through basic training. I wonder if I could do something like that, because I'm an athlete at heart. Like, you know, if I had my dream job, I'd be a wide receiver in the NFL. Like, I love sports, and I love that. Like, I thought that we all
You're a competitive gymnast.
yeah, I got a full gymnastics scholarship to Temple University.
Kind of incredible.
It's pretty okay, right?
And for a tall person, too. I mean,
Well, I wasn't always this tall. I went to the same gym that Mary Lou Retton went to in Fairmont, West Virginia. She was at my gym. So her coach, before she went to Bella Caroli, was my coach. And so this was 1984 when she won the gold medal. And so I was 8 years old, and I did gymnastics, and I did it a lot. I was good at it. I was good at baseball. I was good at sports. They called me Eddie because I was with the dudes half the time, and I could crush the dudes. I could crush the dudes in sports. I still can today. But I did gymnastics, and it got me out of West Virginia. And my mom helped me get a scholarship. It paid for every penny, and then it got me to Philadelphia. That's when I just fell in love with journalism and the Today Show.
I mean, you're a huge success story. Just
I'm pretty
probably
okay
getting out
success
of that
story.
little town that you
Yeah,
were from.
no,
was
I mean,
a big
no, it
deal.
is, and thank goodness for gymnastics, and thank goodness for my mom, that she knew at that time in the 90s how to make my little VHS tapes of all my highlights and send it to colleges. And, you know, there's a lot of that in hindsight. I can see how much work she did for me that at the time went unnoticed and probably unappreciated. And I am so grateful to her for doing that, because it's a lot of work, you know, but it is what gave me wings, because it's what got me to see that there is a life outside of the small confines of West Virginia, God guns country, right? And I got out there, and I got to see people and cultures and experiences, and I just loved it. And then I wanted more. So I wanted journalism where I could learn about anything and everything. And then I got to the Today Show, and I did that on my own. I used to take a Greyhound bus from Philly on the weekend up to New York City, and I would just walk around like Rockefeller Center, and I'd sit outside that studio, and I'm like, how do I get in there? How do I get in there? And I'm like, I'm just going to write a letter to Katie and tell her what I think, and maybe she'll let me come up spend a day with her. And because I did that, and Katie even said, girl, you got chutzpah. That's what she said in the book. You've got chutzpah, because this is a girl who has no connections, all she wants is a chance, right? And she's like, and I love that. There was something in your letter that I loved. And I knew that from the beginning that if I want something in life, I've got to go get it. And so when I knew that I was crumbling under the weight of the Lauer thing at that time, all self-inflicted shame and torture, all self-inflicted, because I wasn't sharing this with people.
Right.
I had to run and do something so extreme. And so once 9/11 happened, I didn't know what that would mean if I joined the Army. I thought we all just we did obstacle courses. That's what I thought about the military, because I didn't have anyone in my life, but I just knew that I needed to go and do something. And so in March of 2002, I went off to basic training when I found out I could be a journalist in the Army as well. So I was in the reserve, and I thought it could complement my civilian career. And so I studied journalism at the Defense Information School in Fort Meade, Maryland, which was the best, amazing, oh my goodness, training that I had in broadcast journalism. It was more than my 4 years in college, because in the Army, there are standards, and you have to be a journalist by Army standards, and they don't let you get away with anything. And so I learned so much about how to tell a story and get in there and use my camera to tell the story, right? And be part of the story. And so then right after I finished my basic training, less than a year later, I found myself in a war zone. And I was covering the biggest news story in the world, right? And I was essentially like a journalist on the ground. I carried a camera and an M16 and an M9. And, and it's like, and I'm a soldier first. So when shit goes down, you put the camera down and you pick up your weapon. And in Iraq, at least my experience is there are frontline soldiers, there are Marines who do combat, and that's their job. But in Iraq, especially in the job I had, because I basically just embed myself with troops, Marines, Navy, Air Force, Army, all of them, and tell the story. It's like I'm at a different place doing a different thing every day. And sometimes that would end in absolute violence, and sometimes it was we were in a civil affairs mission handing out backpacks to school kids, right? Or we were at a hospital seeing how they're rebuilding, or I'm with Ambassador Bremer and I'm learning about nation building and how you come in and quote unquote set up a democracy. But I got to see how all of that is done. And if I just kept on my path of just wanting to be Katie Couric and not be Addie Collins at the time, I may not have had those experiences. And there was a day I was in Samarra, Iraq in 2007. And after Samarra, we went to the Babylon ruins. And I remember reading about the Babylon in the Bible growing up. But all of a sudden, I'm in Babylon ruins and I'm just sitting there and I'm kind of in awe of what I'm experiencing because it feels so surreal. And I thought, Katie Couric could never have this experience because Katie Couric took her, and that's not taking anything away from her. It was about being able to appreciate what I had done in that moment and how I responded. And it was like, I chose to join the Army. I chose to serve my country for whatever reason, but I did it and I do it well. And I'm a really good soldier and I'm a really good journalist too. And I just thought Katie Couric could never have this experience serving my country and also doing the job that I love. And it was one of those moments that it clicked and it was like, okay, Addie, you got to trust yourself a little bit, right? You got to trust yourself. But in the midst of all those sort of epiphanies and realizations is also a lot of turmoil and trauma. And the inhumanity of war gets deep in our soul. And that's what I brought home with me.
Yeah, I mean, you've already been traumatized in the workplace.
I have.
And then you to escape that, you run into another situation where you have even probably worse trauma.
It's compounded trauma, right?
Yeah.
Because when we don't have the tools to cope, and I certainly didn't, that just gets buried deep and deep.
The double
and deep.
trauma.
It is. It's just so much.
Yeah, your story is often cited as a study in how moral injury in the workplace can make a person seek escape in high-risk environments like a war zone.
That's so interesting that you call that a moral injury because that's what I'm dealing with in my therapy today at the VA. I finally, after years, I just accepted the help that they were offering me. And that means that I have to start talking about some really uncomfortable and painful things. And I finally trusted myself enough. You mentioned my recovery and, in the absence of a solution, I would drink because I'm an Orange County mom. And, I was also a college athlete. So we drink and it's normalized. And, I didn't realize that drinking would become such a problem for me until I had problems that I couldn't solve. Yeah. And that's when that, and when that happens too, it's just, another painful truth about myself on top of painful truths. Or so I thought. Right. And then that becomes embarrassing and humiliating. And don't you know, I'm supposed to be better than that. I'm Addie. I can do things. But I would drink and then I couldn't stop because I was just in so much pain. And when I realized, too, that was just another form of surrender. Right. In the Army, we're taught that we have to surrender. I mean, we can never surrender. If we surrender, we die. But in recovery, if you don't surrender, you die. So that paradox, when I was faced with it, it was like I used that against, almost weaponized it as an excuse to not surrender and not admit what I am doing and that this is not, it's not sustainable. And
you kept fighting for it.
I kept fighting. Yeah. I was fighting anything and everything. And part of that surrendering is not just alcohol or any substance that changes my mindset. It's like life on life's terms, dealing with it, but also being willing to reach out my hand and meet the person who's extending theirs, offering me help. Yeah. And part of that is talking about these moral injuries and this shame versus guilt, that dynamic. And it's really intense one-on-one work that I do up at the VA every week. And what happens is that I come in, and I'm sure you understand, Jeannie, when you talk about these things that just seem unbearable and you can't imagine because the truth of them, and it's just so raw, right? That's where we find our humanity. And I know that you have experienced this in such a unique way that so many others can't appreciate. And so while the source of our trauma is different, the pain and effect on us is not. So I had to just start getting honest with myself, right? The truth of it, and to be willing to talk to somebody else and say, can you help me? And so it is that moral injury that I'm learning about, right? Yeah. And it's helping me understand me a little bit more. So all of that sort of what guilt or shame or that I put on myself. Even today in this conversation, you can hear me probably trying to take on a little bit more than I need to. But that is part of understanding and deconstructing these ideas and thoughts that we have or that we are conditioned to believe about who and what we are, and that makes us bad people. We're all here just human beings trying to live and have an experience. And if it was too much alcohol one time, right, or two times or whatever, I'm an alcoholic, right? Because when I put alcohol in my system, I have a hard time stopping. Mm-hmm. I can certainly understand why I am, but it was a hard pill to swallow. I did not want to be that. I felt I would shame my mom. I would shame myself. But the greatest joy of my life, the most freedom I ever had was when I finally admitted that to myself, and I realized that it's no longer an option. And when you don't ever have an option, I reach out and up for other solutions.
Right.
And I find that in recovery and trying to learn about these moral injuries and giving myself a break, right? But being accountable for the things that I need to be, but not taking on more than I need.
And, you know, part of that too is most people that are alcoholics or have addiction issues, until you hit rock bottom and you cannot go forward, you won't admit it or do anything about it. And that could take years.
And you hurt
especially
so
a
many
strong
people.
person like you could go for so long, could survive, could cope, even with alcoholism.
Right.
But, you know, it's hitting that rock bottom that finally makes you realize, if I don't do something, I'm not going to survive any longer.
Yeah, because then we're essentially the walking dead, right?
Yeah.
Because that it's like called a spiritual death, but really what it is, it's just this internal self-hate, you know, that compounds it and makes and believe me, it's like for years I was like, I cannot be alcoholic, right? I cannot be that. And sometimes I just like I wear it proudly, my recovery today, because I'm always in a solution, and I understand that I'm a human being going through human things. And sometimes the pain of what I've experienced or felt, it's like, well, yeah, you would drink too, right? But the power comes in not being able to use that excuse anymore, and that I can go help other people who want to talk about this thing, right? I certainly don't wear a badge that says, I'm Addie, I'm alcoholic. But what I am is I am in recovery, and that means I am trying to recover from the trauma and pain, and then no longer use those as excuses for things like drinking and hurting people. And I'm done doing that. And that's that surrender that absolutely is necessary in order to recover and heal. And I'm trying to heal.
Yeah.
You know?
But even, you know, coming out and being able to discuss it and to own it.
It's not easy. I'm not going to be honest.
That's not easy. It takes a lot of courage to do something like that. Right. And so a lot of respect for you. And I have respect for anybody that is suffering with addiction that chooses to do something about it.
Yeah, and that's why we talk about it, you know, in a general way, just so that you know that you're not alone. There are a lot of me's, you know,
There's
sitting
so
back
many.
and putting away drinks that they don't want to, and they're feeling like they're shameful or they're bad people. It's not a moral thing. It's right. There's a reason you are, but let's get to the reason. And
well, you know, people aren't always able at the time of a trauma to deal with it for whatever reason. So what do you do if you're not going to, you know, confront your trauma?
Right.
And you might not be able to.
Or even know how to.
Let me tell you, like when my son died, I mean, it took me a year just to accept it.
Right.
So all of that grief and anger and all of that was just like stuffed in there.
Right.
And
it is so compacted.
And you don't let it out because you're afraid that if you start letting it out, that you're going to fall apart and that you're not going to be able to go forward.
That is it. It's like I unleash it, and now that it's out in the universe, what do I do with it?
But then it's hard because you have been holding it in for so long. When it starts to come out, those feelings are so uncomfortable. It's very easy to seek, drugs, alcohol,
anything
whatever
for relief.
Exactly.
You want that relief.
To try to dull the pain that you are now finally letting yourself start to experience. You may not have a choice. It could burst out of you. It's so strong, a lot of this.
And that's why it takes a lot of courage to talk about these things. It takes a lot of courage for you every day to come in here and bring in people like me to talk about things that will create conversations where you have to talk about your experience and what a unique and horrifying experience that is. And then what you're able to see. Like I'm looking around here and I just see a manifestation of your son's soul.
Yeah.
And that's what he's meant to do in this world, right? And
I think so. I mean, you have to try to change the way you see the world. When something like this happens, like even for you, in my case, I had to stop seeing this as something that was lost, and start to see it as something that was a gift to me, because the years that I had with him were for a gift, instead of looking at all of this loss now.
What you don't have, you have to look at it.
And and like even like in your case, it was a gift that you got to have your dream come true, to make it to New York and work with all of these tremendous journalists. I mean, what an amazing thing to even get that far. It's incredible.
It really
like
is.
Winning the lottery.
It is. And Ann Curry became like a mentor to me. She's one of my dearest friends. And I mean, I just used to watch her. And Katie is somebody I could talk to, She came down to Balboa a couple years ago, and we got some Balboa Bay bars, and
great.
but and it's just, it doesn't have to end in turmoil, right? We can turn our experiences into usefulness, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing, and hopefully that's what I will do. But we have to talk about it, and those are uncomfortable things to talk about.
It absolutely is, and I think that especially like you being a journalist, it's easy to look at other people's traumas and tragedies and report upon them, right?
But if you are the story,
but when you become the story, wow, now you're in the seat, the hot seat, and wow, it's a lot different when you're actually the one in the hot seat now.
It definitely is, and that's where I found my humanity, though, right? That's where I just, I'm a human being trying to go through this world, and anything that I'm able to talk about, it's just really being willing to talk about my humanity, that shared humanity that we have, because even if my circumstances are different, the way it affects people's lives are the same. So if there's literally anybody out there listening to this and they feel maybe they have a problem with alcohol, maybe they've been confronted in the workplace with something, maybe they've made a mistake that is embarrassing and they don't want people to know about, you're not alone, right? And just being able to talk to you and have this conversation, it does so much for my soul.
Good.
And for my healing.
It actually heals the collective soul of this universe when you talk about this.
Yeah.
Because these are traumas that so many women don't talk about. And we all need to hear this, Addie.
Yeah.
Especially like women that are just entering the workforce or just entering into these types of dynamics in their lives, maybe for the first time even. Young women need to hear these stories from their mothers, because when I was growing up, we didn't talk about these things, so I didn't know what to do when it happened to me.
Yeah, it's brutal, right? Like,
it's
how
brutal.
do you even give it words? Like, how do you...
And then my own mother dismissed it when it happened to me in high school. It was dismissed as, just don't make a big deal about it. Leave it alone. Don't worry about it. But that's not okay.
It's not okay. But even our mothers didn't have that, right? Like my mom, when the Lauer stuff was coming out, and she would read the news, and then she'd be on Facebook. She called me one time. My heart goes out to her, because she was like, "Addie, just stop talking," because she couldn't handle the response that people were having, because she was seeing what they're saying about me, and I just wanted to give her a big old hug. It's like, I can't stop talking. I cannot stop talking.
And why are we listening to the rhetoric of disgusting human beings?
Yeah, because I think my mom didn't have those tools either, right? And she just wanted the meanness and the cruelty to stop, and as a mother, you're desperate to stop it. So I understood in that, but she's my biggest supporter today, and she's so proud, that I did speak up, and so she's just like my biggest hype person, and I'm grateful for her. But I could see in that moment why she would want me to stop, because it was scary for her.
Oh yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Your mom was from a small town.
Still is. She's still in Fairmont, West Virginia.
In small towns, everybody knows everybody's business.
That's right. And then on Facebook and next door, it's it gets brutal.
But it kind of has to be that way in a small town, because it's those norms are what keep the group cohesive and keeps everybody behaving nicely towards each other, right?
Well, you hope so. I mean,
that's the idea.
These days, conversation is getting really brutal, right? And it's hard to have, good adult, educated, informational conversations today that's not so full of rhetoric. But my goal is to just bring in conversations, or have conversations like you and I are having, so it doesn't have to become so extreme or so polarized.
You're a mom now. How have you taught your children? Do you have daughters?
I do. I have a daughter named Hartley, who just turned 15, and I have a son, Hudson, who is 16 and a half.
And how have you ever discussed these things with your daughter? Like, how has she been taught to deal with this type of conflict when she's an older?
Well, I just tell her that her voice matters, and she has one, and she doesn't acquiesce in front of anybody, And my daughter, man, I am so grateful that I get to be her mom, because she stands in her power. I mean, she really does. And, she's got a voice, but she also has access to so much information. And same thing for my son. I worry about the content and things that they are consuming and seeing, and them getting pulled down these rabbit holes of misinformation and extreme ideas. But I also understand that my kids have to have their process, right? And they have to do their thing. So I try to normalize conversations. I have my son a couple of years ago, probably about 5-6 years ago, he, on our way to school one day, was like, "Who's Matt lawyer?" And he didn't pronounce his name right because he was seeing it. And I was like, because he had Googled my name, and the story came up. And he's just a young kid, and those, and I said, Hudson, I said, Matt Lauer is a man that I worked with right out of college. I was really young, and he preyed upon your mom. He said, and he crossed the line that he shouldn't have crossed. And now I'm having to deal with the consequences of that. But he did something that he shouldn't have done. And I can learn my lessons from those too. And they aren't pretty conversations. And if you ever want to have a conversation about it, I'm willing to have it. So my kids, they haven't directly talked to me about it, but I know they know, right?
Okay.
They're constantly online. Even a couple of my daughter's friends was sort of antagonizing me one time because I work at their school, and I have since they were in kindergarten and second grade. They're now in ninth grade, 11th grade, but I still work at the school. But at the time, one of my daughter's friends was on the phone, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I Googled Addie Zinone," and he was antagonizing me from being on FaceTime with my daughter, and it was around my birthday, and Hartley was like, "What do you mean? Like, stop." And she was trying to protect me in that moment. But he was antagonizing me because he had looked up my name and he knew what it was about, right? And in those moments, I have to just say, whatever you see, you find, I can stand behind, right? And I just have to show that my kids that we can be accountable for our behavior, but we don't always have to be victims, and that we can also have our choices and our voices. And if they use theirs with integrity and be honest, then they're going to be okay. And I try to normalize talk. I try to meet my kids where they are with their vernacular and the words they use today and their little acronyms and BRB and LM, whatever it is, have an aura and Riz and all that, because I've tried to have these conversations with my kid that it feels normal and natural. And I'm going to talk about what a 16-and-a-half-year-old boy likely goes through or feels, what his temptations are when he's out there, and there's alcohol and there's women and there's temptation, right? Like, listen, my mom, bless her heart, didn't talk to me about it, right? Because she didn't have anyone talking to her about it. But I want to talk about these really uncomfortable things that are just words that can turn into experiences if we don't have the willingness to talk about it. So I'd rather it be a conversation than something that we have to fix. And if it's something that we have to fix or navigate or work through, we will work through it, because I was given that grace when I've had to work through my stuff.
Yeah. With everything that's happened, all of this trauma, all of these challenges, you still manage to give back. And I know that you're on the board of a foundation. You want to tell me about that?
Yeah, I was board chair of Child Guidance Center, which is a nonprofit here in Orange County. It has been around since 1967. It provides mental health services to the vulnerable communities in and around Orange County. It's amazing. We do amazing work. There are so many vulnerable communities today, especially those who are worried about ICE today. Like, we provide those mental health services that it starts in the family, right? It starts in the communities, in the families, in the home. And if you can get it then, if you can arrest those things there in the home, then they won't spread out into our communities. But the problem is we provide those services to these amazing communities, but today they're afraid to leave their homes because they're afraid that they will be detained. But I was on the board since 2017 because we also have a program called Strong Families, Strong Children, which is the military arm of Child Guidance Center, where we help military families as they transition from active duty into civilian life. And we just support the military that way. And so a friend of mine worked there, and she thought I'd be great for the board because I do a lot of mental health. I've gotten a lot of therapy. I'm in recovery. I was also in the Army, and my ex and I had nonprofits that we worked. So it was like this perfect, combination of experience that I had, and she thought I could lend a voice to it. And so in 2017, I joined the board, and in 2022, they asked me to be the board chair. So for 3 years, I was the board chair of Child Guidance Center, and then I just recently finished that 3 years, basically like a tour of duty, if you want to make it like a military thing. And I'm now parliamentarian, so I'm actively engaged in that board on a weekly basis. We just did this client experience workshop last week. We're dealing with the immigration and those issues, and sort of like how we protect these communities and how we let them know that it's to the best of our ability, we can keep you safe, but please still come get your mental health. And so being an advocate for mental health services is huge for me, particularly for the military, where we're supposed to just have a stiff upper lip.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to suffer so long. It doesn't make you weak. In fact, the most courageous thing I've ever done is not raise my hand in an oath. It's to raise my hand and say, I need some help. That was so much harder for me to do than go to war, genuinely, because I was going to war inside.
Wow.
Right? And it's like, I have to confront that, right? Because it's what comes it's what came home with me, and it's what lives inside of me. And if it done in silence, it becomes insidious.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's sort of the war within I'm trying to battle today.
Yeah.
And then just talk about that. And so Child Guidance Center does so much for it. You know, childguidancecenter.org. It's just an amazing organization.
Childguidancecenter.org.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's just an amazing organization that I'm so proud to be a part of, that they even gave me the responsibility of being board chair. It's like, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure? But,
It's a
you know,
big responsibility.
it is a big responsibility. And we have a fundraiser every year at Balboa Bay Club where we have to, you know, and I get to stand up there and speak, and I get to talk about my experience, and I make it accessible to people who may be afraid that, like, yes, I'm, you know, might be a board chair, but I got some problems, yo. like, let's talk about them. And I love that because it normalizes, you know, the need, the absolute need, because this life is rough. It's a beautiful life, but it's really hard.
Yeah.
And we do not have to navigate it alone.
That's right. That's important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I could probably spend another year talking to you.
Me
It's
too.
so fun.
I do. It's been awesome. I'm so grateful for the
Yeah.
opportunity.
I'm
I'm so
looking-
proud of you.
I hope that I read your book someday. And maybe you'll decide
Some
to.
people have suggested
to
that I
write it.
read a book. I love to write. I do pen to paper a lot, just as part of my recovery and my process.
I wouldn't be surprised if that happens one day.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, that seems like something that would be in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so hard to write about trauma, though. I tried doing it, and I couldn't. I
You
mean,
couldn't.
I mean, I did it for a year, and I made progress with it. But then at the end of the day, I felt like, you know what, writing about this trauma would, unfortunately, I had to out too many people that I care about,
right.
to write about it, and I didn't want to hurt anybody in my family,
Right.
So I felt that it was best just to, you know,
You can talk about it.
yeah,
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that stuff is hard because, you know, you have to appreciate other people's anonymity. And,
yeah,
and
because it's a family story. It's not
is.
just my story. So
right. And it
you
does
know.
become like a family disease, a family story. It
So,
is all in the
yeah.
community. And again, with Child Guidance Center, that's where we try to do strong families, strong children. It's like one is a reflection of the other. And then we bring that into the communities, and then from our communities out into our cities and
Yeah.
into the world. And so,
Yeah.
but what we're doing here today is just amazing, right?
Yeah.
Is we're just trying to be some voices.
Just trying to, you know, try to normalize talking about hard things. It shouldn't be this hard to talk about things that are this important.
Isn't it amazing how, like,
Yes.
I'm willing to go to war and fall under bombs more so than I'm willing to get in a room of people who just care about me and be like, I'm struggling, I can't do it. But it was just the hardest thing I ever had to do was to raise my hand and ask for help, to admit my humanity. And I
Yeah.
felt that was weakness.
Yeah.
But I'm really proud. It takes a lot of courage every day to get up and recognize where we need help, and then relying on other fellow human beings to help us through that process. And my life is full of people who just absolutely adore and appreciate and love me and extend help. And I started to participate in that process. And then I started to grow and started to heal.
Yes.
So I'm grateful.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's a lifelong thing.
It
I
is.
mean, the
Lots
way
of
that I
talking.
see it is life is a practice.
Right.
And you're not healing from something, you're probably hurting somebody else. So
It is true. It's sort of cyclical,
get
right?
on
It's
it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I just want to, you know, I try to be as open and honest as I can in my life, you know, talking about some really hard truths, some ugly and embarrassing truths. But the fact is, I know who I am. And, you know, if I'm feeling shame, it's because I'm putting that shame on me. Nobody else is.
Yeah.
And so I just want people to know that if you need a help, you know, need a hand, you need a help. I'm here because so many people have lent their hands to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So child guidance.
Yeah, I think it's childguidancecenter.org.
Childguidancecenter.org, and we're gonna know exactly what it is, and
Yeah,
and we're
or
gonna
you
have
just
it right
look
there.
up Child Guidance Center.
And we're
Yeah.
gonna plug that on the website also.
Okay. Yeah, they do amazing work, so we would love to
Yeah.
support. And particularly now, those communities are under assault in many
Oh,
ways,
yeah, so
and
important.
they need more help than others.
Yeah. I want to thank Addie Zinone for coming in here so bravely,
Hmm.
telling your story, and hopefully we'll be able to reach the people that really need to hear this, which are young people.
Right.
People entering the workforce that don't understand what a proper work environment
Right.
should be like.
What the experience should be. Yeah.
Exactly.
And anybody out there who's just struggling generally.
Absolutely, because, you know, there were so many levels here of challenge. Yeah.
It's a
we didn't
lifelong
even-
deal, dude.
We didn't even get into your service. I'm sure there was a
know.
lot of, I mean, you came home with PTSD, so I'm
did.
sure there were things that happened that that are also learning lessons that came from that as well. So maybe we'll do a part 2.
Okay, I would love
Yeah,
to, Jeanne. Yeah, I
well-
want to thank you too. This has just been awesome, and I admire you so much for the work you've been doing. And
Thank you so much for joining us today. You're a brave woman, and I I have so much admiration for you and other women that stand up.
Right.
Because, we have to stand up if we want to make change in this world, and it's hard.
That's true. The collective power of the group can help us. And so thank you so much, Jeannie. And I'm really proud of the work you've done. And I just admire the hell out of you. So, and for anybody out there who is suffering, just know you don't have to suffer alone. I did in silence for the longest time. And then I decided I didn't have to do that anymore. We don't have to do life alone. So reach out to me, reach out to Jeannie, reach out to somebody, because you don't have to do this alone. And thanks so much.
Blaze It Forward is a campaign my family started in 2018 after our son Blaze was murdered. Blaze It Forward provides the inspiration to thousands of people to repair the world with intentional acts of kindness. If you would like to learn more about Blaze and how you can make a difference, check out www.blazebernstein.org or join our Facebook group at #BlazeItForward. You can also check out my website for this podcast at www.PeppTalksWithJeannie.com. There you can follow along with my podcasting adventures and learn more about my fascinating guests and their passion projects. I would like to thank all of the volunteers who help make my philanthropic endeavors a reality. Today that includes my producer, Eli Moskowitz, all of the volunteer crew members who join us, and a special thank you to my son, Jay Bernstein, for the original theme song you hear at the beginning and ending of each show. This has been another episode of Pep Talks with Jeannie. Until next time, keep on making this world a better place.